on till 10. I have to pick up people coming in for work.
take the Indians from their home and take them away to school, the Christians set up school systems on the reservations so that they could civilize the savage in their own land.
Yeah. For
And if any of that is difficult for people on this call to hear, I'm sorry, but I can't apologize.
Okay, folks, we now have a quorum present, and the audio stream is turned on. Paul, you there? You hear us?
Yes, I can hear. I've got my video turned off. I'm driving, so I don't think you guys want to see me sideways the whole meeting.
Okay, well, we have a quorum, Paul, and so you want to start, open it, and do you want to do introductions?
Yes. And I can look at the screen and see who's on there. Good morning. Paul Downing, Chair of the MITSC. We have a full quorum, as Paul just stated. I'd like to start off, if we could. On my screen, the first person is Bob. Just a short introduction.
I'm Bob Checkaway. Good morning, everybody. I'm a state appointed member, live in Freeport. I think I am the farthest south in this geography.
Next on my screen is Tony.
I'm Tony Sutton. Well, that's Dawson. I work for the Maine Shellfish Learning Network as well as the University of Maine, and I'm an independent contractor working on the fisheries report.
Excellent. Welcome to the meeting. Sarah.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Medina. I'm a state appointed member and I live in Dixmont.
Next up, we got Kevin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Hancock, State Commissioner from Casco.
Next on my screen is Bart.
Morning, everyone. I'm Bert Polchis, one of the Penobscot Nation commissioners appointed to MITSC.
I've got John.
Yeah, John Caswell, State Commissioner, Bangor.
Other John.
Yeah, John Banks. I'm the other Penobscot commissioner on MITSC.
Then I've got Zeke.
Good morning, everyone. Zeke Croft McDonald, Tribal Co-Commissioner for the Holton Band Mouse Seats.
And then Sandy.
Did you say Sandy?
Yes, ma'am, Sandy.
Okay, because you kind of broke up. Good morning, everyone. It's Sandy Armel, Passamaquoddy Commissioner from Zubayig.
Next, I got Sam.
Sam St. John, Commissioner with the Holton Band Mouse Seat Indians.
Paul, I've got a phone number on my screen. 299.
That's John Cashwell.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
John. Yeah.
He used to be He used to be 007.
Yeah, right. Should be so lucky.
So, Paul's not at his desk. So, based on that, it looks like we've got a full quorum. Paul has the agenda, and again, I'm driving, so I'm not 100% sure what's on the agenda, if he's going to pull it up. Whatever emergency he's dealing with, I'm sure he'll deal with. He'll be back on in a second. Oh, there he is.
Sorry, folks.
Yeah.
I was getting texts from people saying that the stream wasn't working, and I just got a hold of Dylan, and it should be fixed now. So I'm sorry, Paul, what were you asking? Go to the agenda, or?
Yes, everybody's done their introductions. I said we got a quorum, and welcome to the meeting. And Paul has the agenda, and then you weren't there.
Okay. All right. So the the item would be to review the agenda. And if it's a short one, but it was sent out, but if you need me to put it up, I can do that.
Just a note, Mr. Chairman, I have to go at 10.
Yeah.
Was that John?
Yeah,
Okay.
Paul,
Will that lose the quorum?
no, I think we'll still have 10.
Okay,
9,
okay.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, we'll still have a quorum. I just want to note that I'm requesting on the agenda that the one new business item that was added, it would be a brief item, but I'm suggesting that you move that up and do it before the old business. It's about brief descriptions of 2 new books that may be of interest to the commissioners. And there are folks, well, Kevin's one of them. And there are other folks who would speak to the other books, The Gatherings, but this would be a brief item.
We have no objection. I'd like to do that, Paul.
Okay, we'll do the approval of minutes and the director report, and then we'll do that. So
Okay.
the next, I'm sorry. Paul?
I just said, yep.
Okay. So the next item is approval of the draft minutes for the May 18th meeting. They were sent around.
I move approval of the May 18th minutes as presented.
We have a second.
I'll second that. Check away.
Okay. We have a motion to approve, seconded, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Hearing no dissension, Paul, I say that we approve the minutes.
All right, and the next item, I just got a message that the stream is working okay now. The next item would be the managing director financial report. Again, I sent it out in writing and I won't go through it in detail. I just want to make a couple of points from the financial report. First of all, the funds that we have as of now, as of yesterday, we have in the checking and savings a total of $119,000. Our potential additional funding for fiscal 22 and 23 is still pending, as the legislature, as I understand it, has not yet completed the budget. Hopefully, we are still going to get additional funding that was in the governor's change package. Pat and I will be working on a budget for you to review for fiscal 22, but we're waiting on whether or not we have the additional funding, because as I mentioned at the last meeting, our intention would be to draft a budget that includes an additional employee if we know that we're going to have that additional funding. So that's what I have on that. And it's the other part of the managing director report. I don't need to elaborate on it. If there are any questions, though, I would answer them. If there aren't any,
go ahead.
And sometimes I think it's been, well, I don't know, we've done it always, but sometimes there's a motion to approve the financial report. It's up to you.
That's what I was just gonna ask. Susan asked, can we get a motion to approve the financial report? I have
So
Sarah's
moved.
hand.
So
Second.
moved.
Second.
Did I hear it? Okay, I was gonna say, I think Kevin seconded. So we have a motion, we have a second discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any dissension, or that's a unanimous ayes. So hearing no dissension, we just approve it. Paul?
Okay. The next item then would be the item that we moved up, that would be about the 2 new books. And
Yes.
on the Zoom, I think we have Carrie Sack. I don't see Shirley. But Carrie Sack, are you there to talk about the Gatherings book?
I am, and with apologies, there's difficulty accessing your audio on YouTube, and that's where Shirley went. So I'm gonna just start then, unless you want to do something to troubleshoot, get Shirley in.
Well, she was to join the Zoom. That was the plan. But Carrie Sack, are you there to talk about the Gatherings book?
Yes, I am.
I'm here.
I am, and with apologies, there's difficulty accessing your audio on YouTube, and that's where Shirley went.
I'm right here.
So I'm gonna just start then, unless you want to do.
Shirley
something.
has joined the Zoom.
Shirley in.
Well, she was to join the Zoom. That was,
There's a delay. I don't know what that's about. The whole thing that I said was delayed. I'm putting myself on mute. Geez, there's difficulty accessing your audio on YouTube, and that's where Shirley went.
I'm right here.
So I'm gonna just start then, unless you want to do.
Shirley has joined the Zoom.
Shirley in.
Well, she was joining the Zoom. That was,
There's a delay. I don't know what that's about. The whole thing that I said was delayed. I'm putting myself on mute. Geez, there's difficulty accessing your audio on.
I hope somebody fixes that.
I'm gonna just start then, unless you want to do.
Shirley has joined the Zoom.
Shirley in.
Well, she was joining the Zoom. That was,
There's a delay. I don't know what that's about. The whole thing that I said was delayed. I'm putting myself on mute. Geez, there's difficulty accessing your audio.
I hope somebody fixes that.
Paul T, should we close the meeting and start again to get rid of that? Like, it's annoying.
hold on just a second.
There's a delay. I don't know what that's about. The whole thing that I said was.
Feels like a Groundhog Day. I hope somebody fixes that.
Paul T, should we close the meeting and start again to get rid of that? Like, it's annoying.
Hold on just a second.
There's a delay. I don't know what that's about. The whole thing I said was.
Feels like a Groundhog Day. I hope somebody fixes that.
Paul T, should we close the meeting and start again to get rid of that? Like, it's annoying.
Hold on just a second.
Oh my goodness.
There's a delay. I don't know what that's about. The whole thing I said was.
Feels like a Groundhog Day. This is awesome.
Paul T, should we close the meeting and start again to get rid of that? Like, it's annoying.
All right, is it finally gone?
Okay,
Woo.
I'm unmuted.
You're finally gone.
I have no idea what was going on. But Dylan has made it stop. So where were we? We were going to have Shirley and Carrie speak about the new book, The Gatherings. So I'm going to ask that one of them unmute Shirley. Okay. And everybody else will stay muted.
You're finally gone.
I have no idea what was going on. But Dylan has made it stop. Okay, this is. So where were we? This is not working. To have Shirley and Carrie speak about the new book, The Gatherings. So I'm going to ask that one of them unmute Shirley. Okay. And everybody will stay muted.
You're finally gone.
I have no idea what was going on. All right. But Dylan has made it stop. Can you hear me?
Oh, where were
Folks
we?
hear me? Somebody come off of mute and tell me if you can hear me.
Carrie, speak about the.
Yes, Paul, I can hear you.
All I can hear you,
I
but
think we
the
do.
background, whatever that track is. Mute. Finally gone. I have no idea.
I suggest that we all end the meeting and start it over again. This is
I'm gonna
ridiculous.
do
I
that.
agree.
Thank you.
Yes.
We could have saved 10 minutes.
Motion
Leave
vote.
and come back. Carrie, speak about the.
Yes, Paul.
Yeah, Paul, can you hear me? Check away.
Yes, we hear you. We now have a quorum again. So Paul Downing,
Yes, I am here.
I'm suggesting that we go ahead and have Shirley Hager speak about the Gatherings book.
Yes, we were on the book discussion, and so go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I am appreciative of your time today, and I'm with the Friends Committee on Maine Public Policy, Friends being Quakers, and I may be joined by Carrie Sack, who is part of the Episcopal Diocese Committee on Indian Relations. And we are here to let you know about a recently published book called The Gatherings, Reimagining Indigenous Settler Relations, recently published by the University of Toronto Press. And this book has been a labor of love for over a decade. I authored the book with 13 co-authors, 7 Wabanaki and 7 non-native co-authors. The Wabanaki co-authors come from all 4 recognized tribes in Maine and the Maritimes. And our co-authorship is represented by the name on the book, Mobiane, which literally meaning in Passamaquoddy is let us sit together, a name suggested by 2 of our co-authors, Wayne Newell and Mi'kmaq. So in the book, we tell the stories of experiences that we had meeting over a period of 7 years in the 1980s and 90s, in which we spent long weekends together, sharing our lives and getting to know one another across this divide that exists between our peoples. And those in the book decided that we wanted to share the lessons that we learned from those meetings and from our relationships in the years since, that we hope can be a model for reimagining Indigenous settler relations. I think you could say we came to understand that our fates are wrapped up together, and that working together in mutual understanding and admiration and respect can be not only healing, but for the benefit of all of us in so many ways. During the writing of this book, I had a hope that it could be shared with tribal leaders, legislators, state officials, and any others in Maine whose work encompassed tribal state relations, including MITSC. So I wrote and received a grant from a fund through the New England Yearly Meeting of Quakers to purchase 100 copies of the book for this purpose. To make the presentation of this book more meaningful, I approached the Friends Committee on Maine Public Policy and the Episcopal Committee on Indian Relations, with whom we collaborate consistently, to make the book a gift from our 2 organizations jointly. And that is what we have been doing. We've been meeting with legislators, the Wabanaki Alliance, and with hopes to meet with the Attorney General and the governor and their staffs and others. We meet with them, and afterward I mail the book with a cover letter stating our hopes for improved relations and talking about LD 1626 specifically, which I won't do here, but we will do later during the public comment portion of your meeting. It doesn't look like Carrie is on. She was going to say a little bit, but I'll just keep going. So I hope that you'll be pleased to accept a copy of our book. Is there a way that Paul can get your addresses that you prefer to have the book sent to? Or maybe, Paul, you have that list already? And I will get the books right out to you.
Yes, I don't think that's a problem, Shirley. We can follow up and or you can send them here and I'll get them to.
Okay, yeah. I'll check in with you afterward then. And by the way, 2 of the gatherings that we held back in the 80s and 90s were hosted by Irvin and Nadine Polchis in New Brunswick. And I believe, Bert, that might be your uncle and aunt. Irvin was a real supporter and thought so. Irvin was a real supporter and believer in these gatherings. And also John Banks, you might remember, I asked you to review a few paragraphs for me a few years ago now. And this is the same book. It's finally out. So We're really pleased to share it with you, and we hope that you find it useful in your work.
Thanks, Shirley. I note that Carrie is on the Zoom. I'm seeing her. So if she's got something to add.
There she is.
Yes, thank you. I'm representing the Committee on Indian Relations of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine, and the members all read it and enthusiastically suggested that we work with the Friends to get it into the hands of policymakers and decision makers. And that's what we've been doing. And what makes it a really intriguing read is that it reads like a journal or a diary of the different participants who worked on the book, including the fact that you hear the thoughts that some people didn't even want to be there, didn't want to spend any time with any of these people. Why am I here in this group? And then the formation of getting acquainted and relationship building and trust building that happened from that. So you're in for a treat if you like the idea of reading someone's diary or journal, especially when they're not liking what they're doing and who they're with, and how that can change for the better.
Thank you. Thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. And I guess you'll both be joining us a little later. So if you can come back in, well, and let it just happen.
We'll promise I'll make sure the audio's off. I don't know if that was me or
I think Bert has a comment.
Well, Shirley, I remember that. And as my Uncle Irvin would say, super tahu.
Wonderful. Were you there at one of them?
I was.
Oh my goodness.
So,
That's
I
wonderful.
remember having deep conversations with my Uncle Irvin, as well as several other members within our medicine society. And we had long discussions about, we did that anyway. So, well, I can have a long discussion with myself. So, you all know how that goes. But yes, I remember. And thank you.
Well, that's wonderful.
Thanks again. And we'll talk to you later. The other book that we want to have a brief description of is authored by our very own Kevin Hancock. So Kevin.
Yeah. All right. I'll be quick because we've got important work today. But my third book just released last week. It's titled 48 Whispers from Pine Ridge and the Northern Plains. Some of you know I've been traveling out to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation 2 or 3 times a year for over a decade now, and it's just become a real blessing in my life. And I've taken thousands of pictures from my time out there, and I in this book took 48 of my favorite pictures. This is from powwow a few years back, and I paired them up with 48 short meditations that are all 248 words in length. Actually, the book's dedicated to Black Elk. His cabin is just a couple miles down the road from where I stay at Pine Ridge, and he always talked about his cabin as the square house they made him live in. He had come from a life of living in circles and teepees, and his cabin was to him his square house. But anyway, he was escorted on his great vision by the 48 horses of the 4 directions, and that's where the number 48 comes from in this book. And anyway, finally, the book has kind of taken off. Last week, it hit number 1 on Amazon's new releases in photo journalism, and so it's been really fun to share it, and I just wanted you all to know about it. And you can find it right on Amazon, or if you email me, I can help you as well. So anyway, thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm looking forward to seeing it and reading it. So Paul, the next item would be a brief update. First of all, let me apologize for not understanding what the audio stream was doing to our Zoom. And it's the first time I've been through that, but now I know. So hopefully that won't happen again. So the next item would be a brief report update on the sustenance fishing study. We've got Judd and Tony on the Zoom, so I guess we'll start with Judd.
Sure. We sent out a memo and just a beginning partial draft of what we have been doing to the commissioners, and we are in the process of drafting, obviously still researching and collating the research. And the second stream is talking to more Wabanaki tribal members and getting a sense of how people have dealt with the concept of sustenance fishing over the years and expectations into the future. We are looking for any feedback anyone might have on the way the draft is set out, or the outline, or the way the draft is going, so that we can add those or change what we need to. I guess I mean, other than the memo and the draft, I don't have a whole lot more to add at this point. Tony may have some thoughts, but we'd be glad to listen to any feedback or have any questions.
Tony, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I would just reiterate what Judd's saying. I think just in terms of making sure the report does what you all, would like, I think, having anyone who's interested look over and ask questions and, see what we're missing would be helpful at this stage. And, I think just in terms of what we're learning, one of the scopes is, again, trying to understand non-Wabanaki impacts to fisheries. And, I feel like, we've made good progress on understanding that. And again, at this point, I think feedback would only help strengthen, what we've done. So yeah, we welcome that.
And I guess I would just add, we intend to pull together a meeting of the Natural Resources Committee, which is, overseeing this study. Hopefully do that before the end of June. And if commissioners have some thoughts on what was sent around, it'd be helpful if they could get those into me, and then those would be shared with the committee when it meets and meets with the contractors. I guess that's what I had to say on that. I think Bert has a comment.
Yeah, you sent the copy of that, a draft of that? Is that what you're saying?
I sent Paul a, this is Judd, Bert. I sent Paul, it's just a partial draft. It's there, some earlier sections as drafted out. I mean, we're working on the other sections, but that was what we had presentable language on. And so, yes, that's, it should have come to you. I think it came out to everyone from Paul Tebow.
Yes, that's correct. I sent it yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. Okay, so.
Yeah, it was separate from the other materials.
Yeah, I don't think that, I don't see it yet, but.
But Bert, I would just ask that when you have chance, you look over it, and then, because you're on, then John Banks is on that Natural Resources Committee. You might want to confer with him, and just, I guess, just remind folks, that committee is John and Sam, and now Joey, and John Cashwell and James Cody. That's the composition of that committee. So, yeah, Bob.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing me. Can somebody remind me what the purpose of the sustenance study is? Is it to shed light on that term as it's used in either the existing or the proposed amended statute? Is that what it's about?
Bob, this is Judd again. It's not to make any kind of legal definition of sustenance at all. That's not the purpose. The original MITSC minutes were to undertake appropriate, let me see, to review the impact of section 6207 on the quality and quantity of traditional fish stocks and the impact on sustenance practices. So we're looking at non-native policies that have impacted fishing, and we're also looking at sustenance practices and trying to come up with obviously findings and then some recommendations about the different ways sustenance is viewed. We're not trying to make a legal definition, but the way people have viewed it and how the state policies have impacted I guess the capacity to engage in sustenance practices with fishing.
Thank you.
I think John Banks has a comment.
I have just a question for either Judd or Tony. It was a couple of years ago when we started this project. I had sent around to, I think, to either the full commission or the Natural Resources Subcommittee, the results of a survey that the state of Maine DIF and W had conducted. It was a survey that the DIF and W had sent out to Maine residents that hold state fishing licenses. And there was a lot of very good information in that survey that I thought would be useful for this study. Did Tony or Judd, did you get that?
I don't think I got it from you, John, but I've looked at the results.
Okay. Yeah, there was some really some good feedback from the general public about what what the priorities are.
Yeah,
and it really did address some of the issues that I saw with DIF and W and some of their fisheries policies.
yeah, I appreciate that. I've looked at that and had not looked at it for a while, but was expecting to come back to that certainly toward the latter part of the report with people's attitudes and areas of agreement, areas where people can cooperate and move forward, because there was some interesting material in that. I haven't looked at it for a little while, but I've got that in the research materials.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up with you, Judd, a little bit on that and express some of my thoughts about that survey. We don't have to do it here, but we can do it offline sometime.
Yeah, that'd be fine, John, anytime.
Great, thanks.
Any other comments, questions about the sustenance study update? If not, Paul Downing, I suggest we move on to the next item, which is a brief update on the broadband issues.
Yes, please. Sorry. I'm on my phone. So Paul, I'd impose on you to be able to identify people that have their hand raised or wish to speak. I literally can see 3 people at any given time. So I appreciate it. And yes, let's move on.
Okay, so the next item is just to do a brief update on the broadband issue. And I would defer to Bob and Sandy both on this. I can say that, I I attended a Zoom meeting that was hosted by Four Directions last week. They they're part of a fairly large collaborative group that's trying to put together a large grant application for one or more of the tribes, and they're hoping it would be for all of the tribes. And so that's one of the things that is currently going on. I understand that Four Directions met with the chiefs at their chiefs meeting last week and got, it sounds like, a general approval to keep moving ahead on trying to develop that proposal. That grant proposal would be due by the end of the summer, and it sounds like there's a considerable amount of work that would have to be done to put that together. I know, I suspect that Sandy may have something to say, to add regarding other potential funding. And I think Bob may also have some comments. Sandy?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to add that while I think it's fantastic that Four Directions is doing this, that our tribes also have the opportunity to apply for tribal-specific grants that obviously, because they're carve-outs for tribes, aren't as competitive as it sounds like this larger grant for tribes is going to be. So that's available. And I'm not sure if we're going to, reach out as commissioners to the tribes, the communities that we represent, and just ask them, because it's kind of convoluted to me at this point. Because I would love to be able to provide the information and even, maybe assist with some infrastructure concerns for tribes that don't have that. But if Four Directions is attending to that, then that's more than fine, as long as the tribes benefit from this. I'm fearful that the ball is going to drop.
Thanks, Sandy. And Bob, did you want to add?
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sandy. My understanding of broadband and what it involves is pretty limited, so take that into consideration. As I understand it, though, the more remote and rural areas in the state have less access to high-speed, reliable broadband than cities like Portland and Bangor. And what it will take to get expanded or better service to the more remote or rural areas is a conglomeration of capital and equipment and service that I don't quite understand. I don't know whether it's wires or servers or optical cables, but in any event, as I understand it, it requires a consortium of people and investors and consumers to put together a program that will invite providers to the area. And as part of that, you have to A, raise enough money to make it worth their while, and B, put together a consumer base such that there's a market there to be served. In other words, so that each possible broadband supplier doesn't get every fifth or sixth house on the street. I thought it might be appropriate for MITSC to get into, only because the state now has its own broadband effort. They want to see this happen. They want to see this happen to the more rural areas, both on and off reservation. I'm sure that the tribes could manage to put together whatever consortium is required. But since the state shares the apparent interest of the tribes in getting this kind of service, I thought it would make sense for MITSC to offer to act as a broker or a liaison or whatever it is. We spend so much time dealing with impasses between the state and the tribes. I thought it would be fun, if nothing else, to get involved in a project where the interests are aligned, and to get finally, I think it will take an enormous amount of money, and there are large amounts of money now available thanks to the federal government under the CARES program and the Relief Act or whatever it is, the state of Maine has created a whole new office, Connect to Me. And it seems like it's very timely. I wouldn't want to see the tribes miss the boat on this. As Sandy says, there will be all kinds of time pressures to get the grants together and so on. But I'm just beginning to feel my way. And I guess the first question is, do the tribes want us in this loop to whatever, to manage the communications with the state, or would they just as soon run it themselves? But it's there for the taking.
Bert has a question or comment.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, if I remember right, the several years ago, they I thought that the state passed some sort of regulation or something like that regarding the accessibility to high speed internet, the broadband. It seemed to me like they made it a mandatory thing for these companies to do, to take care of. That kind of, around the same time when Verizon had a lot of landlines going in different places, and all of a sudden they sold off to Fairpoint, and which Fairpoint I think came out of New Hampshire or Vermont, something like that, and came in, and they put a few things. But I thought that that there was a mandate for these companies to go into the rural areas. Does anyone have anything that they can share with that? I think this would be the same, kind of in the same direction, but and I know that I spoke before about like I didn't see where this commission would have a place really pushing broadband into the reservations or into other areas, but in a sense, I'm starting to think that the communication for our people would enhance, information, accessibility to information, which in turn can bring out more voices, more understanding, and eventually better relations as well.
So, Sandy and Bob, my understanding was our next step as we try to sort out what role might be appropriate for MITSC is that we were going to send a letter to the tribal governments and feel that out in terms of whether they want us to play some role here. And I guess to go back a little bit, I think our initial interest or purpose was to find out if the tribes already had people who were assigned to this, who were working on this, who were already getting the information, and that if that wasn't the case, that we would try to facilitate that. It's still, I guess, not clear to me whether all 5 of the tribal communities have people that are in fact already doing that and getting all the information. So I think that's part of what we want to find out. I can say that on the meeting I attended that Four Directions held last week, that as far as I could tell, there was only one tribal representative from Maliseet on that call. So I don't know what that means exactly, but I do think there was only one only one representative from the tribes who was actually participating in the call. They did subsequently meet with the chiefs, and so I think we need to find out more about where that's going and whether there is a role for MITSC to play to facilitate.
I can ask about that, Paul.
Pardon, Sam?
I can ask about that, Paul, if you want.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think the one tribal community that did have somebody on the call was from Maliseet. I'm sorry, I can't remember the fellow's name at the moment, but I think it was the tribal administrator. Who is the current tribal administrator?
Brian Reynolds.
Yes, I believe that. Oh, it's Brian still the administrator? Well, it wasn't Brian.
Wasn't Brian?
No, it wasn't Brian. So I'm wrong. It wasn't the administrator. But there was someone from Maliseet on the call. So Bob, I think we were working on a letter. Is that?
Yep.
where
Yeah,
we're
we'll
at?
do that. If as long as I've interrupted you, John Banks, if you're still there, do the Penobscots have ready access to broadband? Are they already in the part of the state that's well served?
I suspect so, Bob, but I'm not certain of that.
Okay.
It could be better. I think on Indian Island we do have. I think the only one that's really available is through the cable, but that that's better than dial-up. So.
And I get concerned about this and about our tribal communities missing out, because it was 3 months ago that the town selectmen from where I live requested a letter of support from me for their broadband access application for the town of Robbinston 3 months ago. So it alarms me that 3 months later, my home community, and I've heard nothing.
Well, I guess that's part of what we're trying to figure out, and whether there's a role for us to play in facilitating the information and communication. So is there anything else on this for now? Our intention is to draft that letter, to send out that letter to the tribal governments and then go from there based on the response we get. If there's nothing else on this item, then it's time to move to the last and the biggest item on the agenda, which is the discussion on the task force recommendations and the pending legislative proposal, LD 1626, that would change the jurisdictional structure under the settlement.
Go ahead, Bert.
I know in the last meeting I made a motion to for a up or down vote, and then tabled it for this particular meeting. Now, before we actually go into that, I think that it would be very important for us to have some discussion prior. We can still be discussing the importance of it, of what we're going to be voting on, first of all, because I think that there's some education that needs to be in place. And I mean, we have some very knowledgeable people here, and I think that all of our commissions have the intentions of doing the right thing. Okay, but I think there's something that we all have to understand in this, is that I stated before, and I've heard a couple other people state it, that our tribal leaders and the legislators that were part of that commission to put that eventually put this bill together, they worked very hard. We as a commission throughout the years have put so many different recommendations in place in regard to the tribal state relations. in regard to, and it coincides with everything that we're supposed to be doing. But the idea, and this is where I have a hard time, is taking, hearing any of our commissioners, talking about taking this proposed bill piece by piece. And deciding whether we're going to agree with that or not. I truly don't believe that's our place. We can look at it. We should read that whole bill. But the fact of the matter is, we have tribal leaders who basically trump my vote or any of our tribal commissioners' votes, because we get a lot of our direction to add, and we as commissioners, individually commissioners, can add our own, sometimes, a lot of times, our understanding of but as tribal commissioners, we're not going to go against our tribal leaders when they come together and agree on a bill of this magnitude. And I don't think that any of the state commissioners really are in that place as well. We can look at it and see how the bill might work or not work. But as far as voting to I can't even think of the word, to support it, that should be a given. I truly believe this commission, needs to support this bill, because just pretty much when you look at it through the history of this commission, the recommendations we've made, they are the base. We provided the base for our tribal leaders and the state legislators to go by off of our recommendations. So now if we go back and start picking apart piece by piece, what does that make us look like as a commission? All of a sudden we decide we might reverse ourselves on our own recommendations? I don't think so. So I think that, I think we need to take a moment and really try to get some education for some of our fellow commissioners to really, so that way you can, really understand, because I truly believe that you're here with the best intentions. But we also don't need to be wasting time on trying to pick apart a bill that our tribal leaders and state legislators have come together with. It's either we agree, we support it or not. Chief William.
So Paul Downing, I guess I would ask you how you might want to go structure the next part of this meeting. My suggestion would be to follow. I think John's got a comment in just a second, but I was going to suggest to follow up on on Bert's initiative, that we might want to, at this point, just give each member on the call an opportunity to speak a little bit about where they're at on this and what as Bert's done, and to indicate if there are questions that they feel still they need answered, or maybe that's just a suggestion.
Yes. So we'll recognize John Banks, but I'd almost want to suggest that, and I think I've talked about, is there are people that have questions in reference to the LD, whether they're new or whether they've just never been part of in-depth discussions about that. I echo what Bert says. I think it's almost counterintuitive to go over each item of the bill and dissect it. Somebody else spent an inordinate amount of time on that, and I just think that would, again, not a wise investment of our time. But let's go to John, and then I'll see what the consensus is.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to going ahead with the way that Paul Tebow suggested today. But I did want to note that those commissioners that have expressed the most concern about not having enough time to review the bill in detail are not here today. That's all.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that too. I was looking at the participants. So I'm parked now. I just want everybody to know I'm safe at Pleasant Point. I had to report down here. We have a FEMA meeting here in about 15 minutes, and I'm just gonna deflect them until around 11 when this phone call or this Zoom meeting concludes. But I've noticed the same thing. There was a lot of concern, questions, issues. Let's go through this line by line, and I'm at a loss as to why. So I think if anybody at this time wants to have an open discussion, state commissioners weigh in, tribal commissioners weigh in, and just where our support at MITSC lies. Are we gonna say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't want to get involved? I think the neutral position is not the right position for us to hold. And that's just my 2 pennies, but please, anybody that wishes to speak, I can't see everybody's screen, so I'd impose on Paul Tebow to identify anyone wishing to speak.
Well, I guess I'm proposing to pick on people. I don't see anybody throwing their hand up right now, but if there isn't an objection, okay, Bob, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I don't know if I can squeeze it all into the 15 minutes remaining. I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover here in the question of just what it is the commission is acting on. I think all of us want to see improved legislation for the state and the tribes. And I can think of at least 3 different ways for the commission to approach the pending bill. One is the yes or no vote. The other, which I've sort of been following on my own, although I'm not wedded to it, is what I call the product insert model, referring to those things you get in your medications where FDA doesn't tell you whether to take it or not, but tells you what the consequences would be, so that you know not to eat this on an empty stomach, or when you have to call the doctor. The third way for us to approach it would be for us to actually get in to the meat of the negotiations and see if we can help bring the state, by which I mean the legislature and the governor, together with the tribes, rather than just wait until the process runs itself out and there's a vote in the legislature, and then wait to see whether the governor adopts the bill or not, and whether the legislature overrides a veto if there should be a veto. But to reiterate, I want an improved set of laws governing this area. And I think that the proposed default federal law, which is largely what the 1626 offers, is a great step in that direction. I would like to see that people understand the bill so that there are no surprises, as there have been under the 1980 Acts, where people say, well, I didn't expect that was going to happen. I think we should be able to predict, tell people what they can expect from the bill. That's enough for now. Oh, I can go through my list of questions and comments. In fact, why don't I take a few of them? Going back through the old reports, I see that it was a big concern of the commission maybe 20, 25 years ago as to how tribes would get development approvals if needed on their lands. And there was a proposal that, the tribes will propose comprehensive plans like zoning ordinances to MITSC, and that LURC on the other side of things, LURC would consult with the tribes when there were developments on non-native lands that might affect them. My question is, has there been no development on tribal lands during this period that we've been that there's been no action to develop tribal lands in the last 15 or 20 years? Or have you been going to LURC, or have the tribes just taken autonomous responsibility for their own development? Can anybody tell me?
I think John can speak on better on behalf of the Penobscot Nation, but my understanding is that we do follow the guidelines of LURC when it comes to building in certain areas. So, but John, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I can speak to that. There haven't been a lot of development initiatives on our lands at Penobscot. There have been, we've looked at some wind power projects, and it's really difficult to get people to invest in working with tribes on economic development projects because of the regulatory structure that was developed as part of the Maine Implementing Act. We have our own comprehensive land use plan and our own process and committee structure and so forth to evaluate those kinds of projects. So we do that. We do that. But then there's this overlay of state authority as well, and so that presents a conflict that scares investors away a lot.
What scares them away is the fact that they don't know for sure whether they're going to face LURC, or that they assume they will.
Yeah, they're just, I don't really deal in that area a lot, but what I understand from talking to tribal administration is that it's just too complicated, and they just don't understand the exact mechanism or the exact permitting processes, because the state of Maine doesn't accept ours as being legitimate.
Got it. As long as I'm on existing facts, how are I understand the Passamaquoddy have a couple of tribal enterprises operating, Passamaquoddy Maple and the Blueberry Company. I don't know if the other tribes have similar enterprises, but how are those taxed currently? Is the state, taking a piece of that, or is it exempt? Or do we know? Anybody? I'll leave that for the next.
I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know either.
Bob, would it be too much to ask to get a list of these questions, and I can send them to somebody who could answer them
Sure.
in a better way?
I sent only moments before the meeting began an email, but I'll resend that with any comments that reflect anything developing this morning. Hold on a second.
I looked at the email and I agree. I'd like if the tribal representatives could get that to the administrations, makes sense. My answer for
You're cutting in and out there, Paul. I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out, Paul?
Oh, I just said I didn't want to answer for tribal government, so I would ask that the representatives forward it to the administration. And I think it's good questions, but I'm reluctant to answer on behalf of either Indian Township or Pleasant Point. One as a citizen and two as an employee. But I just think that they are very valid questions, and I think they have value.
Well, let me see if I can condense. Yes, John.
No, I just wanted to add kind of an example of a successful business enterprise, if you will, on Penobscot, where there is no state authority or state regulation, and it has been successful. And that's the Penobscot Nation Forestry Program. We've developed a long-term forest management plan and a forestry program that's been recognized throughout Indian country. And we're not subject to the Maine Forestry Practices Act or any of the state forestry regulations. We work under the federal BIA forestry regulations and our own Penobscot Nation forest management plan and comprehensive land use plan. So I just wanted to throw that out as an example of a successful enterprise that a tribe has developed without that umbrella of state regulatory authority.
Got it. Now, to some extent, the draft bill lapped me because I've been thinking of the terms of the original bill, and I think they may have already addressed some of my problems. For example, I noticed from reviewing the MITSC reports over the years, we've suggested several times a prior consultation protocol where executive branch agencies are required to at least consult with the tribes before taking certain action. And I think that is now, I don't have the citation, but there is now a proposal in 1626 that would do that. Yes, Paul, anybody?
Yes, that's correct. I think it's section 6217. That's a new 6217 that's proposed. That carries over a lot of the same provisions that were in 2904 last year. It's quite similar to, and that's something that MITSC through myself and Jamie worked on quite a bit last year.
Thank you. Title 12, Section 6302A, sometimes called the Fred Moore bill, which provided for licensing for marine harvesting. Doesn't that have to be repealed if the 1626 passes? Okay, we'll think about that one. And of course,
I was just going to say it would certainly make sense to appeal that if 1626 gets enacted. I mean, who would want to have to operate under two separate, sets of regulatory mechanisms?
And then, of course, the drum I have kept beating is people should know that as comprehensive as this bill may be and all the work that has gone into it, it would not of itself, with the passage by the legislature and signature by the governor and agreement by the tribes, it would not solve either the Penobscot River case that has been in court now for I don't know how many years, or the saltwater fisheries problem that has dogged MITSC for the years, partly because we've felt as an institution that 6302A was a rogue amendment to the Settlement Acts and would have required approval by by all the tribes in the first place. Now, if they simply repeal that, I guess that takes that off the list. Now, what is the commission's pleasure from here? I'm glad to condense those questions that I posed this morning that might actually deserve a response from somebody in tribal government. But are we headed toward a yes or no vote, or do we want to propound, commentary, or do we want to go farther and get into the negotiations and try to bring it home? I put that in the
Bob,
form of. Go ahead.
I would like to share the document, well, the email that you sent with a friend of mine, just to kind of get some of those answers, because I feel like, you're asking really, really thoughtful and quite brilliant questions, and we just don't have the answers. So I feel like rather than making decisions, we should have the information to help facilitate the process.
Well, I don't want to derail the process if Bert, for example, wants to call for a vote today, but I'll be glad to condense, my wanderings and get them right back to you. What was that?
I think we had an echo is all, Bob.
And Kevin has a comment.
I have a question, Paul, that I'm sure you can answer. The task force ended up making, I believe it was 22 consensus recommendations. So then I move over to LD 1626. Is the essence, which I've also got right here, is the essence of 1626 the enactment of those 22 recommendations? Is that essentially what makes up the essence of that bill?
Well, I guess I would say the short answer is basically yes. I mean, the statute is titled an act to implement the recommendations of.
Yeah.
So to a large extent, yes. And in some portions of the bill are literally, basically taking the task force recommendations and putting them into the legislative language.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was my understanding. So that brings me to my comment or perspective. I keep going back to the task force document because for me it's so much easier to read, and the first 9 pages lay out the 22 recommendations. So to something Bert had talked about, and I believe John and Paul D, I agree with. I don't think it's complicated to understand those 22 recommendations. They're spelled right out in the front of that task force report, and they're quite straightforward. So I think it's possible for sure for all of us to understand the essence of those recommendations. Point number 1. Point number 2, which Bert took up, that task force, which was empowered by the state legislature and the tribal governments, was a comprehensive task force of state senators, state representatives, and top level tribal leaders. I mean, these were key people participating in the process, and they came up with essentially a set of consensus recommendations after doing a great deal of work. And I think that that work as an entire body should be respected. So that's my second point. I agree that we should be looking at this as a whole, big picture as a whole. And then my third point is I do think it would be at very least extremely odd for MITSC not to have an opinion on that task force report and the bill it turned into. Like, I don't know how I would explain to anybody that we decided not to have an opinion on it, because it is the essence of why MITSC exists. I mean, this is like a fastball down the middle in terms of our responsibility. So I agree there as well that we should have a perspective on it. And then finally, personally, as one commissioner, I'm totally in favor of endorsing it. And I personally support it. And I'd like to see, before we're done today, MITSC, as Bert began this subject talking about, I'd like to see a vote on that question today before we leave. So that's where I'm at.
I agree, Kevin, and think it goes without saying.
Okay, John Banks.
I'm going to share a perspective with you all in a very few words. That to me sums up what happened in 1980. Somebody asked me recently, what is this all about? What's the Maine Implementing Act? What do you mean? What's the Settlement Act? What is it? And I thought for a minute and I said, well, it's sort of like somebody holding a gun to your head and telling you that you have to agree to my authority and my jurisdiction over you if you want me to agree to let you have some of a very, very small portion of your land back that we took from you illegally. That's what it is. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, Bert, I see Bert's got his hand up. Okay, go ahead, Bert. I don't see anyone else asking right now.
So I know there were commissioners that wanted to go pull this thing apart piece by piece. And, I know Sarah, you're pretty new to the commission, and I know, I like I said earlier, I believe that, every one of our commissioners want to do the right thing. And, if I remember right, you wanted to you were kind of going along with going piece by piece, discussing those. But, I wanted to hear from you, what your thoughts are, because, it is important. All of the thoughts of our commissioners are important. But, but I do have every intention of as Kevin had mentioned, going through with this vote today. But I wanted to have this discussion too before we went, started looking at that. What are your perspectives?
One of the things that you mentioned, Bert, was that education is needed. And I don't believe that I have been educated well enough yet to know what the consequences of some of these actions will be. And another thing that you mentioned was that none of you tribal representatives are going to go against your tribal leadership, which I fully understand and agree with. Some of us are appointed as state representatives, and we don't have as clear cut a direction, because who is the state? Is the state the legislature? Is it the governor? Is it the attorney general's office? And I know that the governor is not in favor of this legislation. So I'm a little bit reluctant well, not a little bit, I'm a lot reluctant at this point to vote in favor of this while it is still being worked in legislative committees. I do agree with the concept and the principle. I just am uncertain about some of the language that, as Kevin mentioned, the 22 consensus points that were agreed to by the committee are fairly well understood, I think. I understand them, but they're all short. They're all in one or two sentences. And the that expression about the devil is in the details. So while I agree with the concept of those 22 points, I'm not certain that the details have been thought all the way through. I do agree that the legislative and tribal committee members that served on the committee put a lot of effort into it. They have a lot of background. They're obviously people who cared about this and wanted to do the right thing. And I understand that. But when you make as broad a statement as the tribes will be subject to federal Indian law, does everybody understand what federal Indian law really is? I mean, this book that I've started reading, even in the first few pages, there are questions about what is the definition of a tribe and things like that. But this is just a summary of the federal Indian law. And I would like to know, for example, whether federal Indian law in all cases is better than the state law. So what I'd like to do is think, what are the problems that we think we're going to solve by being subject to federal law rather than state, and what are the problems that it might bring up? For example, one of the things that I wonder about is the definition of tribal lands, and the proposal in this bill is that the lands that the tribes might buy could be anywhere in the state, whereas in 1980 there were certain parcels and townships and whatever specified. Now I think it's fine that the tribes be allowed to buy land anywhere in the state. I mean, willing buyer, willing seller, buy land, fine. But if I go buy land in Calais, for example, I'm going to be subject to all the rules and regulations of the town. But under this proposal, if the tribe buys land in Calais, then it is subject to its own regulations. So when you're part of a community like that, when you own land in a community, I think you have an obligation to somehow work with the community, not be an autonomous landowner within that community, not subject to any of the rules of the town. So there's little things like that. I mean, while it sounds fine, tribes buy land anywhere, tribes control their own destiny, tribes control the land. We've got to remember that, like it or not, there's 1.3 million people in this state of Maine, and we spend so much time these days talking about how to work together and respect each other. I just have some trouble trying to understand how going our separate ways is going to really be helpful in those cases. Now, as far as controlling activities on, Indian Island or, some of the major forest land tracts, things like that, I mean, that's another story. John Banks mentioned that the tribes, the Penobscots, have a very successful forest management program that's subject to the Bureau of Indian Affairs regulations, not the Maine Forest Practices Act. Well, I'm familiar enough with the forest practices on tribal lands to know that the lands are managed responsibly and sustainably and actually do fit within the Forest Practices Act. So it would not be any hardship. I mean, the Forest Practices Act was set up to encourage landowners to manage land properly, and the Penobscots are doing that. So they're not in conflict with the Forest Practices Act. So I just wonder sometimes whether some of these, things that we think are going to be better under federal Indian law really are going to be better for the tribes and for the tribes' neighbors. I could go on, but the last thing I'd like to say is without some of the other state members of the task force on this call today, particularly James Cody and Richard Rosen and John Cashwell has had to drop off. I'm very uncomfortable voting today without those other members having an opportunity to weigh in. That's it for me for now.
Excellent.
John Banks has a comment.
Yeah, just Sarah, thank you for that discussion. It's very interesting, but can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So do you know any large landowners in the state of Maine that have ever had any concerns with the very complicated clear-cutting regulations under the Maine Forest Practices Act? Or are they all very, very happy with it?
No, they're not all very, very happy with it because in some cases it forces practices on land that may not be the best practices, but landowners have learned to adapt to it and live with it, and it's it's not a hardship anymore. So, and I don't see the Penobscots wanting to create a lot of large clear cuts and things like that. So I don't really see that, the companies that have the most problem with it are those that use some intensive silvicultural practices. Seven Islands Land Company, for example, the company that I worked with, really didn't have a problem with staying within the Forest Practices Act. And I kind of liken our management to the management of the Penobscots. It's a pretty kind of in tune with the land type management.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to comment on is you had mentioned about concerns of individual citizens of the state having to be subject to the jurisdiction of the tribes. If you mentioned about the bill allowing the tribes to buy land anywhere in the state. I haven't seen that with the existing people that have camps, camp lots, and other, living within our, some of our lands, our trust lands. I just haven't seen those complaints. In fact, a lot of folks are very happy that we're there. and that we're managing the lands. It gives them an opportunity, for example, to get a deer permit on our land separate from the state. So they might be able to harvest 2 deer in a season, one on tribal land, one on state land. So they see that as a benefit. And also, this is really interesting, is that many of the citizens in one of the towns where we have a lot of trust lands, it's an unorganized town. And at their town meeting, they talked about wanting to organize, but they wanted to organize under the Penobscot Nation tribal government as opposed to the state government, which I thought was, I took that as a compliment about our, our management and our regulatory structure and so forth. But of course, that couldn't happen unless every one of those landowners decided to agree to have its land put into trust status with the government. So it's, it's a lot of people are very happy to be living among us.
I'm sure they are. There's no question about that. I guess my concern is more about organized towns and fitting in organized towns. And the way the bill is written, it probably would never happen, but the way it's written is that a tribe could buy land in an organized town and do whatever it pleased. And, chances are pretty good that nothing bad would ever happen, but it does leave the door open. And those are the kinds of things that I think legislation should address before they become problematic. I know, for example, this whole issue of gaming has been a big issue. And if a tribe could buy land anywhere and do what it wanted, it could buy land and create a casino in the middle of some town and not be subject to any town regulations. That's a bad example.
The gaming has come out of the bill.
I know it has, but
so, there's a lot of what ifs and, oh my God, the sky's gonna fall. And we went through all of that during the land claims case too. Everybody's going to, they're gonna take your houses and all of that crap. None of it transpired. So, I'm glad that you said that it would probably never happen because
it probably won't. But another issue, John, that's close to home for you is managing fish and wildlife. And right now, there are some, you're managing tribal land and waters that are associated with that land, but I think one of the provisions in here is that tribal members would have the right to hunt and fish anywhere without necessarily following rules set up by IFNW. And I would rather see some kind of a protocol for the tribes and IFW to work together to manage fish and wildlife, because we all know they don't observe boundary lines.
Oh, so, yeah, and we were very aware of that, Sarah, when we set up our fish and game program back in the early 80s. And so, in fact, we have adopted Title 12 as tribal law. We took state DIF&W laws, all of Title 12, and adopted those as tribal law in areas where we don't have a specific rule or regulation.
Have all tribes done that?
I don't know, but Penobscot has, and we want to give our law enforcement people as many tools as they possibly can have to carry out their responsibilities. And state of Maine, Title 12 has some good language. There's some good law in there. And so we adopted it as tribal law, as a backstop.
So what is it in federal Indian law that is advantageous that you don't have with state law regarding all Indian affairs? What is
Equal treatment under the law is what we will have if LD 1626 passes. Equal treatment under the law
equal treatment with whom or with what?
with all other indigenous people residing within the continental United States of America, all other American Indians, Alaska Natives is who we would have equal treatment with.
And is that equal
on.
treatment? How is that equal treatment different than what you have under state law now?
Because
I
then
mean,
we wouldn't have had to battle for access to be able to access federal law that applies to American Indians, i.e. the permanent reauthorization of the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act from 2010, the Indian Child Welfare Act, which VAWA, everything has been a fight for Indian tribes to be able to access laws that were put into place after 1980. So we were not being treated, we were being treated differently by the state of Maine based on race. And so 1626 will put us in parity with our indigenous relatives throughout the United States.
Right. So I'm gonna step in. I think Joey Barnes has had his hand up for about 10 or 15 minutes. So I'd just like to recognize Joey real quick.
Thanks, Paul. I listened to what John had to say earlier, and I want to echo what he said. I spent more than 20 years of my life in law enforcement, and specifically as a chief for 17 years, I ran the PD and the warden service. And we always run into issues when it comes to the state and how they interpret the law. And John's right, we did the same thing with our tribal court. We adopted Title 12. Matter of fact, most of our laws and regulations are stricter than the state of Maine.
Right.
So we're not treated equally. And it was always a fight to deal with anything with them. And I could, talk specifically about saltwater fishing rights to our tribe and the fact that it was never negotiated in 1980. And the state just has assumed authority over stuff they don't have a right to, trying to tell us that we can't kill porpoise, which our people have done for thousands of years. So I think it's funny when the state takes a stance of wanting to stop us from doing stuff. All our tribes own land across the state. We own lands in 5 counties. It's almost acting like that we're doing something wrong. And it frustrates me when people talk like we're going to do, we're bad people and we're going to do things differently than the state. We don't. We regulate stuff, I think, at a better level. And John's right, when it comes to force practices, we don't clear cut. We have lands all around our lands in the Jackman area. And most of them, when you go up and watch their force operations, they wipe it clean. Our people don't do that. We have a plan in place and we have laws and regulations in place. And it's frustrating when you see, you question why that would be better for our people. In most cases, we're not recognized, when there's issues that happen. And when you deal with non-natives in our communities, they want to control something that should be controlled by us.
Right.
They're coming into our communities, they're coming on our lands doing things. And it's like pulling teeth when you deal with that. So I guess I just don't understand why we're feared. Like, we're going to do bad things. And in most cases, our practices are better than the state's. Thank you.
And before you get started, Bert, we have about 4 more minutes left on this. I'll make a statement.
Paul, can I interrupt for a second? This meeting was scheduled to go till noon.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about as far as me. I have FEMA waiting on me upstairs. If I leave, I don't know if that breaks quorum. Can I turn my duties over to, let's say, John Banks to
I got to count heads here. Yeah, we still have, hold on a sec. Yeah, we would still have a quorum.
Right.
And we did, in the notices that went out, we did invite folks who wanted to join to make some comments. And we have
Yes.
at least two, maybe three people who have indicated that they wanted to join the Zoom at the point when we opened that up. So,
Yep.
Okay.
So all I wanted to say was, when I was on council, I remember there being a meeting in Indian Township where we had MITSC asking the tribal government questions that were outside the purview of what MITSC should be doing. And I think in this particular incident, some of Sarah's comments, we're getting into that government to government theme, and that's not what MITSC's role should be, in my opinion. And based on the bylaws and everything else, I don't think that we should be asking tribal governments their positions on X, Y, and Z, and why would it benefit you versus now type of deals. I just think that exceeds our purpose. And that's just my personal opinion. And I may be completely wrong, but I'm not going to ask a chief for him to defend his position on X, Y, or Z on anything. He's the chief of a nation, and I'm going to respect that. So I think we're kind of starting to split hairs. And you made one comment of people that were wanting to be on this meeting. I don't know what reason why they're not on this meeting, but they had the opportunity to be here and have the same questions that you just posed, and they're not here. So if Bert, as a sitting commissioner, wants to call something to a vote, he has that right, and it's already been seconded. So, that's just, oh, well, I'm sorry, James, you didn't, John, you had something else to do. I have something else to do. So that's just my 2 pennies, but I really do. I've kept FEMA waiting long enough. I thank you for your attendance for everybody, and I do apologize, but I have to take this meeting. So thank you.
Hello?
Well, I guess Bert, I see that you're asking to be recognized. I think with Paul leaving the meeting, we need to decide if we still have a quorum. We have 9. We need to decide if someone else is going to, take over and chair the balance of the meeting.
I heard Paul hand that over to John.
I did too.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations, John.
Okay. Well, is John accepting that?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
All right, John, where do you want to go from here?
Thank you, Kevin and Bert. And my first order of duty will be to call on Bert Polchis since he has his hand up.
Thank you. So, what Paul just said, I fully agree with. Sarah, you mentioned something about the tribal committee members that were on that commission. Those committee members were actually our tribal chiefs, our vice chiefs, and accompanied by our tribal attorneys. So, they're not just committee members. They are leaders of nations, and each of us belong to nations. Yeah, we might, be referred to as tribes, but we are actual nations. And so when it comes to, whether or not we're better off under, federal law versus state law, we've seen how the state law has kind of hindered us, and a lot of times stifled us, smothered us as indigenous nations, indigenous people. Okay. But when it comes down to it, the idea that we might decide to buy land in various parts, other parts of the state. Well, think of it this way. Before the Settlement Act, our tribes owned, right around 2/3 of the state of Maine, which in turn still got stolen away. And we were given an opportunity, and nothing to do with the state. The state put no money forth at all, not a penny. It was the federal government that stepped in and put something out there to help us as indigenous nations to purchase land back that was stolen from us. Okay, so to think that anyone would want to further keep us from accessing and growing some of our land base back, which when you look at it, is very little. And John had mentioned the fact that some communities that actually exist right alongside, or in some of them, I think like almost in the middle of it. But and they have no problem with it. We actually have pretty good relations with some of the neighbors, the non-native neighbors in the areas. But for the lands that we have, when you think about some of the land, if you're able to ever look at and see some of the lands we have in what are considered fee simple, that we've been trying for forever to put into, get into trust. The reasons, and most of the reasons why they're not the towns don't agree to put them in trust is because they fear loss of control over what they can do with us. They want this, they want that, and Carabasset is one of those big issues too. But why shouldn't we be able to put those lands in trust? Why shouldn't we not be able to utilize those lands as we feel fit? Our people historically have been and still are. We were born with the responsibility to care for the land. The land is not just a piece of property. The land is our relatives. We are land. We might move around, but we are every part, every essence of everything of our land. Whether it's the air, whether it's the water, the ground, the animals, we are very much a part of that. And to have somebody, the state trying to limit us in being who we are with our land, that's ridiculous. So the federal government actually allows us more freedom. Don't get me wrong, and I know John would agree, and some of our other tribal experts would agree that there are certain things that the state offers, but that comes with relationship. Developing good relationships, and usually that comes, department by department, and then even that we have to fight for. The only time we get anything in our favor has been if it benefits the non-native population much more, and we get little tidbits. Okay, so with federal, going under federal law, that allows us to be who we are, much more than being limited by the state. Um, I have every intention, and I'm not sure if this would be the correct time, but we had talked about bringing this to a vote. You know, I made the motion, it's been seconded, it's been tabled to be revisited at this particular meeting, primarily for this meeting. And I believe at this moment, I'm going to bring that motion back in to that we go ahead and vote on this. And the idea is, you know, when, you know, we vote for it, and if we vote, you know, I'll vote in favor of endorsing this bill. You know, we can have more discussion as to how we're going to word, you know, our endorsement. Maybe then we can focus on some of the finer points of the bill. But to sit there and say, you know, the leaders of my nation, or the leaders of the Passamaquoddy Nation or the Maliseet Nation, don't know what they're talking about. If to act as if they don't know what's best for their people, that's absurd. So I am going.
Is that a motion, Bert? Are you making a motion?
It is. I'm making that motion that basically bringing my original motion and the second, you know, your second, that, you know, so if you want to second it again, but I am making that motion.
And your motion is to
vote to endorse
the legislation, or to endorse bringing that issue back to this meeting? Sorry about the process.
I endorse the committee, the task force recommendation on this bill.
I need a clarification here. Endorsing the task force recommendations is not the same thing as endorsing LD 26 drafted. I need to know what is actually the motion.
Well, how did I word it last time?
Endorsing LD 1626.
Okay, then that's the one.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor that MITSC endorse LD 1626. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Kevin Hancock. Okay, is there more discussion? I know Sarah had her hand up. I didn't know if she was seconding it or had some discussion.
No, I would just like to clarify a couple of points. First of all, I do respect the process and the committee that developed the recommendations. I realize it was a high-level committee. I support the concepts in the 22 consensus report points. And I wanted to make sure you understood that my reason for asking about the differences and the benefits of federal versus state law is to try to understand what we are trying to accomplish and whether this LD is the best way to do it while covering as much as possible and avoiding unintended consequences. I'm not questioning the tribe's right to own land or determine its own course, things like that. I'm simply trying to understand whether there might be better ways to do it. And I realize that there's been a lot of thought behind this. I just think that there are some unanswered questions. For example, Joey mentioned the saltwater fishing. It's not addressed here at all. So I'm just concerned about taking the whole big bite all at once. Thank you.
Kevin?
Yeah, I have a question back to Bert about possibly modifying the original motion. And this is just a question, Bert. So you tell me what feels right to you. I'm wondering if the motion might do two things. First, to endorse the recommendations of the task force on the changes to the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Implementing Act. And second, to also endorse LD 1626. I think it might help to include both of those documents in our endorsement. But that was really a question back to you and how you felt about that.
Bert, do you feel like responding to that?
Yeah, yeah. I think that would be good. So yeah, if we can change that, language, that motion in that way. Yes, I make that motion.
Did you get that, Paul?
I believe the motion would now be that MITSC endorse both the task force recommendations and LD 1626.
And I assume, Kevin, that your second would still be in order since you
Second.
brought the issue up. Yep, okay, motion made and second. Is there any further discussion? Bob, check away.
And I see Sam has his digital hand up. You want to recognize him first? I think
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sam, I couldn't see that digital hand, but go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. It was just adding to what everybody else is saying, but basically, it just echoed what Bert and you stated previously.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, if I'm not out of order, just looping back for a couple of things. First, do we have any members of the general public still on the line? I thought we did, and then Paul said they're not here. Is there anybody from the public who wanted to?
I'm here.
I see Carrie Sack is on here, and I was going to call on her if she had any comments after the commission members have all expressed their comments. Thank you, Carrie.
All right, and a couple of footnotes, if I may. I think it was Sarah who said the governor is opposed to the bill. And believe it or not, I'm not so sure that that is an accurate statement. All I have to work from is her written testimony from the last bill, LD 2094. She had 6 paragraphs of commentary, and I don't read any one of them to say absolutely not. In fact, as to the first and I assume most important, the governor opposed to the bill. What? I don't know how that's happening. Is anybody else hearing the echo? Okay, I'm going to try again. In the governor's written testimony last time around, she remarked on the fact that the tribes would be able to acquire land anywhere in the state, and then the federal Indian law would give them power over land everywhere. She concluded that paragraph by saying, yet few people seem aware the legislature is considering a bill that would provide for that result.
Well, that's, if I could respond to that, I mean, that's just not true. There's a whole process that the tribes have to go through to put lands into trust through the federal government, through the Department of Interior. It takes years sometimes, and it also requires input from the public. It requires public hearing. And so there's plenty of opportunity for people to, weigh in on that. So I don't understand why the governor would make that statement, because it's not true.
Well, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we're meeting each other eye to eye. I mean, her complaint, as I take it very strictly, read it very strictly, is few people seem to be aware that this would be the result. And that's a relatively easy fix. All you have to do is make sure that the legislature and the general public understands that that's the way the bill would work. Now, I won't go through the rest of her list of specifications because I don't even know if the target, so to speak, has moved. One more footnote, I guess, to Sandy's comment that all the bill would do is provide equal treatment with that of the other tribes throughout the other 570 some tribes throughout the 50 states. Not exactly. Some of the other states that are bound by these so-called restrictive settlement agreements, like Maine's, which are mostly states that arrived at terms with their indigenous population in violation of the 1790 Trade and Intercourse Act. Some of them have their own individual schemes too, including, of all things, Alaska. Alaska has a scheme all of its own. I mean, it largely follows federal law, but because they were not there in 1790, the federal government and the state of Alaska and the tribes have dealt with them separately. What I think Sandy's point goes to is that no other tribes are bound by anything like current 1731B, which carves out the state of Maine from all federal statutes. I mean, that really ought to be dealt with. To get to the point, I think, well, I would be willing generally to endorse the whole idea of 1626, but only if we had the right to supply some commentary. In particular, from my perspective, we have to let people know that the saltwater fishery and the Penobscot River problem are not going to be resolved directly by LD 1626. And the reason I say that is I don't want the general public, including the native public, to someday find out that that didn't happen and then say, well, why didn't they take care of that in the process? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bob. Is there any other commission members that wish to speak to the resolution the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, we can, I don't have a agenda in front of me, Paul Tebow. So do you think it would be appropriate to hear from the public on this issue now? Or is there a session later on in the meeting that deals specifically with public input?
No, it was part of this agenda item. I guess the question is whether or not you want to open it up at this point. I think there are two, and there might be three people who've contacted about making comments, and I think two of them, Carrie and Shirley, are in there now. I would just caution anyone who's doing that to be sure that they're not on the audio stream once, when they're in the Zoom. I know that Ambassador Dana had indicated to Paul Downing that she would try to monitor the meeting and be available, although I'm not sure that she still is, because I think that her availability may have ended at 11 o'clock. But if Ambassador Dana is monitoring the meeting, then I guess, I'd suggest that, we say that we're inviting her to join us now. But again, to not be on the audio stream if she joins the Zoom.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. And let's hear from Carrie Sack now from the public.
Thank you very much. I'm here by request of the Episcopal Committee on Indian Relations of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine. And this committee was created in 1991 working for 30 years to improve relationships between Wabanaki tribes and descendants of settlers in Maine. And the committee wanted me to let you know that at its 2020 convention, it reviewed and adopted the recommendations from the bipartisan 2020 report on the Task Force on Changes to the Settlement Act, and adopted an official resolution in support of the changes. So just wanted to let you know that the entire Episcopal Diocese of Maine reviewed and trusted and adopted this resolution. And then just speaking for myself personally, I just have the thought of asking how intriguing wouldn't it be to know about all of the laws and policies throughout humankind that were perfect enough to anticipate every detail and unforeseen problem that might ensue as a result of anything that got officially or not officially put into any policy or law. I also ask for the huge opportunity to feel the empathy opportunity. This is an empathy opportunity that fear of change, fear of losing control, fear of not having a voice or a decision about what may occur when a new law or policy comes into effect. Isn't that like the treaties throughout our history? Look at what, feel the empathy opportunity of this moment. And that's mine. And I just, I'm gonna put in the chat the Episcopal request. So I'm just gonna add that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carrie, for those thoughts. And I see that we have Shirley Hager on with us again, and I would like to ask her to share her thoughts if she would like to.
Thank you, John. Well, as Carrie and I mentioned to you earlier when we spoke about the book, our two organizations, the Friends Committee on Maine Public Policy and the Episcopal Diocese Committee on Indian Relations, we're meeting with legislators and state officials whose work encompasses tribal-state relations to share about and present the book, but also to let them know of our strong support for LD 1626. In our meetings, we explained that we closely tracked and supported LD 2094 from the previous legislature. And members of our groups attended every one of the task force meetings that resulted in the 22 recommendations for amending the Settlement Act. I myself attended all of those meetings, and I came to understand that the Wabanaki tribes are not asking for special or unusual privileges. In fact, as people have said here today, they're only asking for the same rights and privileges that the other 570 tribes in the other states have. And the other thing that I came to understand, we talk about this whole notion of fear in the book, The Gatherings, but I keep wanting to say, if you have fears and concerns, there are 49 other states that you could pick up the phone and call. And I would like to say this to the governor, pick up and call and see how it's going, because it's going. We heard testimony from tribal attorneys that have worked across the country. And in every case, they said that Maine is an outlier. People ask, what's going on in Maine? Because in their state, they have very positive agreements and compacts with the tribes that benefit everyone. We learned that there are many restrictions in federal Indian law that tribes have to live by, and many requirements that they consult with and form compacts with local communities and with the state before certain actions can be taken. So it's not carte blanche in terms of what tribes can do by any means. And we learned that many states celebrate the relationships that they have with the tribes because of the benefits that accrue not only to the tribal communities, but to the state as well. So, you know, our position is that it's unconscionable that the application of federal Indian law has been uniquely cut off for tribes in Maine, resulting in, among other things, their inability to access over 150 federal laws that have been passed since 1980 that tribes in the other states benefit from. And special concern in Maine is that in other states, not only do the tribes benefit, but the surrounding communities do as well. And goodness knows, rural communities in Maine need all the resources they can get. So we have been calling on the legislature and state government to correct this denial and restore to the Wabanaki their federally assured rights. I'd like to say that not only does the Friends Committee support this legislation, but through efforts to educate Quakers throughout the state, Quakers have been engaging in a process to adopt minutes, much like the resolution that Carrie mentioned in support of 1626. And a minute was passed by Quakers in the northern half of the state this spring, and a similar one is being considered by Quakers in the southern half of the state. And when you receive your copy of the book, you'll have a cover letter with it that summarizes our thoughts on the legislation. So thank you very much, and I wish you well in your deliberations.
Thank you very much for those comments, Shirley. And thank you again for sharing that book. I'm very much looking forward to taking a look at it.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, okay. I see Sarah has her hand up.
Well, I would like to thank the public commenters too, and particularly note that Shirley mentioned that there are over 150 federal laws passed since 1980 that the Maine tribes are not benefiting from. That's the kind of information that I'm looking for. And it may be because I'm relatively new to this group, but I'm just trying to understand what all these benefits are and trying to understand what's the best way of implementing them. So I'd still like to say that that I'm not going to vote in favor of this motion because of a couple of reasons. One is I don't like to vote on something that isn't spelled out entirely yet, that there's still some questions on. And the second is that there are several state members of the group that are missing. And I'd like to make one final comment about the legislation. Unlike, I think, any other bill that I have seen, this bill says that it cannot be amended unless the legislature and all 4 tribes agree to an amendment. So the comment about what law is perfect, I agree with Carrie. There is no perfect law, but this law is going to have very tight reins and make it very difficult to amend it if and when we find out it needs to be amended. Thank you.
Yeah, Bert, go ahead.
Sarah, the amendment that the rules on the amendment that you're referring to is in place right now. That is in place. So the amendments can't take place unless all 4 tribes, well, all 4 tribal nations agree, and the state agree. It can't, so that's how it is right now.
Well,
that's a rule that was put in place.
Understood that the MIA is much smaller, much less broad than what we're talking about now. So because something's in place now doesn't mean it should stay in place in the future. As we're looking at it, we're changing a whole bunch of other things. So I think that should change too. I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, did you have your hand up?
Yes, and now I can't get it down. I actually had a question, I think, from Ms. Sack. You posted to the chat a resolve by your group, but I think the chat will disappear when this meeting ends. Is there some way you can perhaps email that to me? Or I'm on the Episcopal mailing list from John Diefenbacher Kroll. If that has already come through there, I'll have a record there, but otherwise I'll lose the chat, I think.
Yes. I will, should I send it to Paul? Because and then do it that way?
I may be the only one who's asking for it. I'm robert.checkaway@gmail.com.
Okay. And
Thanks.
then okay, no problem.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments to the motion that's on the floor? Bob?
I'm not sure procedurally the right way to do this. As I've told you, I'm willing to give a broad general endorsement to 1626 and the task force recommendations, but only if we get some opportunity to comment. There are a couple of things I think we really owe it to everybody to talk about. Now, should I make that a rider to the existing motion, or what's your pleasure on that?
Well, my own thought on that would be that since this bill got carried over, I suspect that there will be taken more testimony in a public hearing type of setting when it comes back, if it does come back, and that would be an opportunity, I think, for MITSC and individual commissioners, I guess, if they wish as individuals to make those sorts of comments and ask those questions. Does that sound right to you, Paul Tebow, in terms of the process?
Well, it's correct that when the bill comes back, they have said that they'll be having another public hearing. And MITSC, we held back on submitting testimony because we found out that they were going to hold over the bill, so that they went ahead and had a sort of truncated public hearing, but they also said that they were going to have another one. I think we anticipated that there still may be back and forth in the intervening months about some details of the bill. So I think MITSC kind of by consensus kind of held its fire on submitting testimony at that point, and we would still weigh in, I assume, as part of the process, in the next session.
Does that satisfy your question, Bob?
Well, we're getting close. I would be willing to vote in favor of an amended version of the motion, which would permit either the commission as a group or any of the members to submit comments. I don't want to just rubber stamp it.
Yeah. As Paul said, I think that opportunity will exist. Whether we put that in our motion or not. But if Kevin and Bert are comfortable with adding some language to the motion, then I would entertain that. Bert? Yes, Bert.
All right, as I stated before, before I actually, brought that motion back in, that we can, the motion basically is to endorse, endorse. Now, we can, however, figure out how to write that endorsement, how to word our endorsement. And maybe at that point, that's how we can put those, those comments that you're referring to, Bob. Yeah, the main thing is, the motion basically is, are we going to endorse it or not? But we do still need to be able to write up, what our, write up our endorsement. Maybe that's the time when we can actually add those particular comments, our concerns that may exist.
Well, yeah, and again, the bill, the bill is be carried over, so there is going to be that opportunity. It's a live legislation, so there will be that opportunity for public input, questions, and so forth. Again, I'm sure. Go ahead, Kevin.
Right. I wanted to say the same. I appreciate Bob's question and comment. It just seems like certainly the subject is fluid and is not over by any means today. But I definitely prefer keeping this motion clean and simple, keeping this motion clean, simple, and as is without any added detail to it. I mean, obviously, at the next MITSC meeting, any commissioner could make a motion that MITSC take a new position. That never ends. So a motion today has no restriction on anyone's ability to make a motion tomorrow. But I just think a clean, simple vote on endorsing or not is what's needed, and I wouldn't want to qualify it or add to it. So I want to stick with what I seconded. I mean, ultimately it would go back to Bert, but
I agree. I agree. We can work on the other part later. But as far I agree with you, Kevin. We don't need to add to it.
I agree as well.
Thank you, Zeke. Is there any further comment?
Question the motion?
Yeah, I have a quick comment before we move the motion. And I just wanted to share another story with you that Shirley reminded me of when she was talking about the other 49 states. And we have had some, such discussion on what federal recognition means and what's going on in the other 570 something odd tribes. So, I started my career with the tribe after getting out of forestry school in 1980 and went to work for Penobscot Nation just before the land claims was finalized. And I had to, set up our whole natural resources department in anticipation of us getting back 150,000 acres. And so in doing that, I joined some of the national organizations, national tribal organizations, to see how other tribes operated. I joined organizations like the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society, which is a national organization, and other national organizations, the Intertribal Timber Council being one. And so I had a lot of exposure in my early career to a lot of the other federally recognized tribes in the natural resources management area. I got to visit all kinds of reservations all over the country, from Florida to California to Alaska. We had a big conference up in Alaska. And so I've become somewhat familiar with, what goes on in most of Indian country in the United States in terms of natural resources and land management. And so, when I realized what a vast difference, well, let me just back up for a second. So in the year 2000, I took off a good part of the summer and traveled personally from reservation to reservation from Maine. You know, my first stop was Connecticut, and then I went up through New York, and then down through the middle part of the country to the southwest, and I visited many reservations. And what we did on that particular journey was that when we crossed a border into a new state, we stopped at the information booths at each state and looked at how they dealt with their tribes in the state. You know, there was, and it was really enlightening. There was so much cooperation, so many cooperative ventures. The state's state tourism bureaus were endorsing the history of the tribes, and they were working cooperatively on many, many projects, especially around history and tourism and so forth. And there was also many, many business arrangements, you know, compacts for different economic development activity. And you could see where tribes and states cooperate, and you could see the development that went around many of these reservations because of the tribes. I mean, you take Choctaw in Mississippi, for example. You know, if you go to the Choctaw Reservation, fly into Jackson, you drive to up to the reservation, and driving there, it's like driving in rural Maine. You know, there's obviously some poverty, not a lot of
I
development.
seen him come back.
It's quite
I know.
rural. And then when you get to the reservation, the whole area just opens right up with all this economic activity. There's lots of shops and stores and doctors' offices and supermarkets and everything. And it's all because of the presence of the Choctaw Indian Reservation and the cooperative relationship that they have with the state. So, you know, then I come back to Maine, and it was disappointing to understand that those same relationships don't exist here. In fact, I remember back then having the feeling that, you know, instead of Maine endorsing and working cooperatively with the tribes and recognizing us for what we are, recognizing our inherent sovereignty, it's almost like they're trying to keep us invisible, or actually trying to make us go away. So it kind of gave me a feeling that cultural genocide is alive and well in the state of Maine. Thank you. God, I'm supposed to be chairing this meeting too. Anybody else have any other comments? If not, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
John, if I could interrupt, did Sam vote?
I said aye, but I don't have my cam on.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do that again so Paul can get it. All those in favor? of the
John, could you
resolution-
just have the members vote individually?
Okay, we'll go that way. Sarah, how do you vote?
No.
Bob, how do you vote? You're muted, Bob.
Present,
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
present or abstain.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Hancock, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Bert Polchis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joey Barnes, how do you vote?
Yes.
Zeke Jordan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Yes. And Sandra Yarmel, how do you vote?
Sandy, you're on mute.
Sandy?
Sorry, yes, I vote yes.
And Sam St. John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote affirmative as well.
This is Sarah. I didn't realize I could abstain. I'd rather abstain than vote no because I'm not totally against this.
Okay, Sarah changes her vote to
To
abstain.
abstain.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
So just to double check with Paul, so that's 7 in favor, no opposed, and 2 abstentions. Is that what you have, Paul?
That's correct, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. What's next on our agenda, Paul?
That completes the agenda.
Wow, with 10 minutes to spare. That's good. Does anybody have any last comments? Is there anyone from the public that wishes to weigh in on MITSC?
I have one piece of other business, John, and if I might, it's a quick one, not to discuss today. I just want to put it back out there. It came out up last meeting as well. I don't see any reason going forward not to be meeting in person.
I agree with that, especially after the debacle we had at the beginning of this meeting. That kept having deja vu over and over and over and over.
Okay.
Thank you for that comment. I agree with you on that. All righty, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at this point.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Motion by
second.
Bert. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Zeke. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Aye, aye, aye,
Have a
aye.
good one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everyone.